Musicians are inspired by other musicians all the time. It's what makes creativity continue to thrive. But have you ever noticed that some songs use parts of other pre-existing songs? Is that even legal? If you know the word sample within music, then you know where I'm going with this. But even then, stick around. I want to know how many of these samples are familiar to you. Hi everyone, and welcome to Music Theories, where I explore, explain, and analyze all topics related to music, music theory, and music history. I have some really dense, juicy videos that I'm working on that are taking quite some time to finish. If you've been a part of this community for some time, hang tight. I promise there are good things on the way. But in the meantime, I thought it would be fun to test our music knowledge with a light video and take a look at some of the songs you may or may not realize have samples from other pieces of music. But first, let's get on the same page and answer some frequently asked questions. What is a sample? And are samples legal? Sampling is a technique used in music production that involves taking a piece of a song and reusing it in another recording. Samples can be used exactly how they existed previously, or they can be manipulated in different ways. Sometimes they're sped up, slowed down, repitched, looped, spliced, etc. This is legal so long as you have permission or a legal agreement with the person who holds the original copyright. Sampling without permission can get you in big trouble financially, especially if your song happens to do really well. There are some myths floating around on the internet that sampling is legal within a certain amount of seconds, or that certain circumstances like education can exempt one from needing permission to use other people's music. But none of that's true. It's safe to assume that if you're going to be using someone else's work, you're going to need permission from them. All that said, I have a bone to pick with copyright law some other time, but I digress. Today, sampling is a massive aspect of American pop music, especially in hip-hop. This type of sampling can be traced back to Jamaica in the 1960s. Music producers such as King Tubby, Lee Scratch Perry, and Errol Thompson began using recordings of reggae songs to create rhythm tracks that they could DJ over. As with many other incredible pieces of American culture and history, this technique was brought over to the US when Jamaicans immigrated in the 60s and 70s, and from there it became a prominent part of the development of hip-hop. That, in and of itself, is an insanely interesting story that I highly recommend reading about. Hopefully we can touch on the origins of hip-hop in its own video at some point. Today, hip-hop is more popular than ever, and remains an integral part of many other genres, which, again, is something I'll be delving further into in the future. And the art of sampling is still going strong. If you're like me, this is where you thought this story began. But interestingly enough, I learned that sampling goes back even further. There was a technique that was first used in France in the 1940s as an experimental genre of music called musique concrète, spearheaded by French composer Pierre Schaeffer. Schaeffer spliced tapes from different recordings together to create what he called sound collages, but, in French. He manipulated these sounds using a machine called the photogene. Now, it's unclear to me whether there's a connection between musique concrète and the pioneers of hip-hop in Jamaica, but it certainly is possible. There's an age-old belief that sampling is straight plagiarism, that it's unoriginal, or a lazy way to create music. Others, including myself, believe that sampling in and of itself is a creative process that involves a lot of work. I'd love to know your thoughts on this in the comments below, so long as your opinion is shared in a respectful way. Unfortunately, copyright on YouTube is a gigantic pain in the butt, and I won't be able to play clips of these songs. But with all that said, I still think I can make this fun, so let's dive into our list. Here are 8 songs that include samples of other songs. Let me know how many you already knew about. If you were sentient in 2008, you'll definitely remember the song Paper Planes being played every 5 seconds. The song was written and produced by British artist MIA alongside Diplo, and it's actually a bit deeper than a lot of people think. The lyrics are inspired by MIA's struggle to obtain a work visa for the United States and act as a satirical image of how Americans view immigrants, particularly from developing nations. But we're not here to discuss song analysis. We're here to talk about how Paper Planes sampled the Clash's 1982 song, Straight to Hell. This song was released as a double A-side to Should I Stay or Should I Go, and deals with a similar theme to Paper Planes. The lyrics criticize how immigrants were being treated in the UK and the US at this time. They describe massive unemployment rates when Northern England closed its steel mills, the general attitude toward people who don't speak English, and even touches on the American soldiers who abandoned children they fathered while in Vietnam. Now, instead of simply cutting and pasting a piece of the recording, MIA and Diplo decided to use what's called interpolation. This is when a sample is re-recorded rather than spliced from the original recording. Artists tend to use interpolation when they, number one, don't have permission to use the song, or number two, the sample itself is too expensive to license. This has to do with the legality of owning what's called a master, which is the original recording itself. So when someone's music is interpolated rather than sampled, the artist only pays the person who owns the songwriting credits, rather than paying the songwriters and the person who owns the master. Since the members of the Clash are listed as songwriters on Paper Planes, it's safe to assume that the reason for choosing to interpolate was due to funding. And speaking of songs being played every 5 seconds, there was a song released in 2011 that blew the lid off charts globally, and it was called Somebody That I Used to Know. At its time of release, it charted in the top 10 in 30 countries. It has been named one of the best-selling digital singles of all time and has gone multi-platinum in 10 countries. This song does technically sample Baba Black Sheep, but that doesn't count since it's in the public domain. Written and recorded in his parents' Australian home, artist Gautier had no idea that the work he was creating would change his career forever, as well as featured artist Kimbra. Gautier, or Wally DeBacker, began this songwriting process with a sample. Whilst browsing in his local music shop, he came across an album called Louis Bonfa Plays Great Songs. One song in particular, Seville, would inspire DeBacker to write his biggest hit, and essentially be the bed on which he would write the rest of the song. DeBacker said he loved the aura and the texture this tune provided, which also explains his decision to sample rather than interpolate. Though Bonfa passed away in 2001, his estate shares writing credits with DeBacker on this tune, and the beautiful piece gets to live on through this massive hit. Beyonce first launched her solo career in 2003 after her successful run with, trio Destiny's Child. Her first single as the powerhouse that she is was Crazy in Love, which featured her future husband Jay-Z. The song was a huge hit and stands as a dance floor trigger for millennials everywhere. But did you know that Crazy in Love also features a sample from the 1970s soul group The Shylets? Did you also know that Beyonce was initially not a fan of the sample? She felt it was too retro and that horns had no place in the 21st century. She also only gave producer Rich Harrison 2 hours to write the lyrics after she approved the track. But it ultimately worked out well for the three of them, as it did for Eugene Record, who wrote the song that it samples, Are You My Woman from 1970. When I hear Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger by Daft Punk, I always think of how Kanye West sampled it in his major hit Stronger from 2007. However, did you know that Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger itself is a sample? I love when this happens. It's like sample inception. Released in 2001, the Daft Punk tune featured a riff from a 1979 track called Cola Bottle Baby by Edwin Birdsong. Similar to Gautier, Daft Punk discovered the self-titled Birdsong album at their local music store. Cola Bottle Baby spoke to them, and one of their biggest hits was born. Birdsong commented on the sampling in an interview in 2016, talking about how he recorded the song 30 years prior and feels so blessed to have it featured in this song. He himself never achieved huge success, but does have a loyal fan base and has been sampled more than once. That said, he has absolutely made a pretty penny on Cola Bottle Baby alone, since he's listed as a writer on both the Daft Punk song and Stronger by Kanye West. If we're learning anything from this video, it's the importance of your local used music store. 1999 was the beginning of a long, successful career for one Marshall Mathers, also known as Eminem. The Slim Shady LP was his first full-length album after being signed by Dr. Dre, and it was one of the most popular albums of the year. It has since qualified quadruple platinum according to the RIAA. The opening track of this album is My Name Is, which is a song that introduces the callous alter ego created by Eminem, who he called Slim Shady. The album goes on to tell more stories of Shady and his life living in a trailer park. The album has received extensive criticism for its misogynistic tone, though Eminem has insisted that these lyrics don't reflect his actual attitude and opinions, and that he views this album the way he views movies, purely for entertainment value. When Eminem approached Labi Siffre, a British musician and composer, for legal use of his song I Got The in his opening track, Siffre, an openly gay man, insisted that Eminem change any misogynistic or homophobic lyrics in the song. He claimed that dissing victims of bigotry was lazy writing. So Eminem did change the lyrics that were deemed offensive. However, the original uncensored version was accidentally released on a compilation album a few months later. Either way, he received the permissions required to use the sample, which actually comes from the B section of the song and can be heard at 2 minutes and 9 seconds. Ironically enough, I Got The, which was released in 1975, came off of an album titled Remember My Song. We most certainly will. This next one is actually one I discovered by accident while I was doing one of my TikTok top 10s. Beyonce's 6th studio album, Lemonade, was released in 2016. On this album was the highly acclaimed song Hold Up, which charted in multiple countries. Diplo again becomes a character here, since he was the one who had the idea to sample Can't Get Used to Losing You by Andy Williams as the foundation of the track, which would later become Hold Up. Ezra Koenig of Vampire Weekend, who's also a writer on the song, was the one who suggested an interpolation of the chorus from Maps by Yeah Yeah Yeahs, which can be heard in the chorus of Hold Up. A third sample was added at the very end by Beyonce herself, and it was the hook from Soulja Boy's 2008 song, Turn My Swag On. This song has a whopping 15 songwriters on its credits because of all the samples used. Within this same era was one of Drake's most popular releases, Hotline Bling. Hotline Bling did decently well in the charts and won some awards that year, but it did receive mixed reviews from critics. The reviews on average complimented the track itself, but questioned the lyrics. Others called the song flat out controlling and sexist. This tune was produced and co-written by Canadian musician Anthony Paul Jeffries, aka 1985, who made the creative choice to build the song on a sample of Timmy Thomas's song Why Can't We Live Together from 1972. Thomas's song was inspired by the events of the Vietnam War and posed the simple question that serves as the song's title. The writing of the song was emotional for Timmy Thomas, and he felt that it was the general attitude at the time. It was also his biggest success. He told Spin in an interview that year that he didn't know the sample was being used until one of his family members called him on the phone to ask if he'd heard Drake's new song. He confirmed that Drake had done it the right way by contacting his publishing company. When asked about the contrasting themes between the two songs, Thomas said he didn't mind because Drake hadn't used any of his lyrics. Overall, he was really, really excited that Drake had chosen his song to be sampled and that he was getting his music back out there. He went on to say that he'd be thrilled if Drake were to invite him to perform the song with him on stage, but unfortunately, he never had the opportunity to do so. He passed away after a long battle with cancer in 2022. Oh, I really wish Drake had called him. We're going to round off this video with a sample that blew my mind. In December of 1975, singer-songwriter Eric Carmen released his first single, a power ballad called All By Myself. If you're wondering, yes, this is the same song released by Celine Dion in 1996, which ultimately became one of her biggest hits in the US. This song is incredibly famous, and it's used in countless movies and TV shows, and even some memes. But did you know that the song is based on the second movement of Sergei Rachmaninoff's Concerto No. 2 in C minor, Opus 18? This was a piece that took Rachmaninoff a little less than a year to compose, and codified his fame as a composer. It remains one of his most popular pieces. However, at the time, he really needed the win. His first symphony in 1897 was a huge disaster, under-rehearsed and poorly performed. Because of this, Rachmaninoff was in a state of mental instability for 3 years. He was dealing with severe depression and writer's block. His second concerto was his first piece completed after seeing a neurologist, who was able to successfully restore his confidence and his mental stability. This piece is actually dedicated to that doctor, Nikolai Dahl. You can feel this pain and feel this emotional journey through the second concerto, and it makes sense to me that it would inspire a romantic ballad. Now, Carmen was under the impression that Rachmaninoff's work was in the public domain when he wrote All by Myself, since he passed away in 1943. However, the estate made it clear after the release that the rights were still protected, and they were able to come to an agreement that both All Myself and a second song, Never Gonna Fall in Love Again, would reward the estate with 12% of royalties. I have to admit, I'm not familiar with Rachmaninoff's library, so finding out that his music was used in a power ballad was super cool to me. Pop music and romantic music are a lot closer than people think. And that's going to be all we have for now, but if you'd like to see more sample countdowns, or even countdowns in general, let me know. I do post short form countdowns on my social media pages in between the videos released on my channel, so be sure to follow along there as well. I have more music fundamental videos coming up soon, as well as more from the philosophical side of musicology, so make sure you subscribe and hit the bell if those are types of things you're looking for. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.